Hello again and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd. Thank you for joining us for another hour of answering those gardening questions. We'd love to hear from you, so if you have a question, you can call us at 1-800-676-5446. You can also submit those questions and pictures for a future show. Email us at byf@unl.edu. You'll need to tell us where you live and give us as much information as you can about that question. If you'd like to keep up with Backyard Farmer during the week, make sure you follow us on our social media channels, YouTube, Facebook. Right now, let's get things started with some samples. And Wayne, those are going to escape before you can talk about them.
Yeah, I won't be able to look at the camera because I have to keep an eye on these things, make sure they don't get loose in the studio, although they won't do much damage. What I've got here are strawberry root weevils. They're a common home and building invader this time of year. They're active right now because they've been cooped up in a box in a cooler. So they're warmed up and ready to go. But what they do is they try to get out of the heat of the summer inside. And they crawl on walls and up on ceilings. And sometimes, unfortunately, while you sleep, they crawl on you and wake you up. But that's about as bad as it gets. Sometimes they're mistaken for ticks just because those antennae are real long. So it looks like they have 8 legs. And really, they fall typically when you try to catch them off the ceiling or on the wall, and then you got to try and find them on the floor. So, best thing is any kind of a container that you can put up underneath them, let them drop in there, and you can kick them out. Vacuum cleaner that's got a bagless system on it will work well to vacuum them up and then empty them back outside. Or there's always the good old soapy water pail of death.
And so don't keep your strawberries on the counter or they're going to eat them?
No, the adults really don't. Yes, the larvae of some of these species will feed on strawberry roots, but they feed on the roots of a lot of different things and typically aren't damaging.
All right, excellent. Put them back in the box.
What do they call that long, like a snout that they have that weevils have?
A snout.
Snout? Okay.
They do call it a snout.
Really, they're really good looking. Yeah.
Proboscis.
No, that's what a butterfly has that it drinks nectar with.
All right, thanks, Wayne. All right, Lauren, out of your own landscape.
Oh, imagine that the pathologist would have diseases in his yard. That's what I try to create. So if you go by my home and I have a lot of disease, that was intentional. Mm-hmm. So maybe, or maybe I didn't have time to manage it. But I brought along something that we're kind of on the front end of, and this is a lilac, and we're just starting to see powdery mildew. And I don't know how close we can get on these leaves, but you just kind of see this dusty appearance overall on the leaves. Almost looks like somebody would take baby powder or something and just kind of dust the leaves when they start. And you can kind of see the little starts of little clusters of fungal growth. And this is something that we see every year in lilacs, and usually starts a couple weeks after we get the longest day of the year. So as we see that light intensity drop, we tend to see powdery mildew on lilacs starting to show up. It's not something that's going to kill the plant, and you can do a few things just to try to manage it if you'd like to. The powdery mildew spores do not like a lot of free moisture, so one thing you can do is actually for this one, we can talk about overhead irrigation, which can help reduce it, but you're not going to control it. You can use sulfur sprays. If you have a new plant that you're trying to establish and you're seeing a lot of powdery mildew, you may want to do that. But otherwise, just one of the things you're going to see, it's going to get worse. Your lilacs are going to defoliate some, and that'll be powdery mildew.
All right, thanks, Lauren. All right, Kelly, the challenge is whether you're going to actually eat one of those on air.
Yes, I was asked that, and I think I will pass. But I have a plate of onions, and why? Well, it's county fair time, and we have a lot of 4-Hers entering exhibits at county fair, and of course 4-H is a youth program of land-grant university. So in Nebraska, it's a youth program of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, coordinated by Nebraska Extension. So at this time of the year, we're doing some judging of things, and we'll often hear people say, now why did that get a purple ribbon and this one get a red ribbon? And onions are a good example. The key thing to remember with judging is 4-Hers are learning how to prepare vegetables for storage and or marketing. So a lot of times you'll see some onions, there might be all the peels are skinned off, they look beautiful, they're shiny, they're really, really clean, and they have a red ribbon. And then you'll have a plate where all the skins are on, they're not as shiny. There might even be some dirt on those outer skins, and they will have a purple. And that's why, because the 4-H'er prepared them correctly and prepared them as they would be for storage or marketing, rather than looking really, really pretty at the county fair. So, and that's true of all the vegetables, so stems on, stems off, it all depends. So how you see things in the store for market, or how you would store them yourself, that's how they should be exhibited at fair.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly. And yeah, we don't really want you to take a bite of that on air. All right, Wayne, you get the first pictures tonight, and lots of ID. So this one is Bladen, which is an interesting place. Working in the yard, the insect was in the back of the pickup. What is this?
It's a robber fly. They're predatory. They eat other insects, so one of the good guys.
A robber fly. So what is their larval stage?
They're a maggot. I'm not sure exactly where they hang out on that one. I've never really, no one's really asked. No one ever really says anything about that.
A robber fly.
Just ask about the adults.
Very cool. Trying to rob the pickup, apparently. All right, this one is a Plattsmouth, your second picture. This was on bee balm, and she was really surprised when this moved. What is this?
It's one of our mealy bugs. It's one of those, all those white plumes coming off, that's all wax that the insect has exuded out of pores on the surface. And sooner or later, a lady beetle or something like that's going to come along and find it as a nice meal.
So a mealy bug the size of a penny.
That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah. All right, a mealy bug. All right, and your final one for this round is from Stromsburg. What is this insect?
So that's a Prionus beetle. That's a male, and you can tell because it has the really long, thick antennae. The female will be about twice his length and about 3 times as wide as he is, and have stringy, thin antennae. The larvae of these feed on the roots of grasses. They're typically not a lawn problem, although you can get them in lawns. They're usually not in high enough numbers to worry about.
And the long antenna are for what reason? Just because?
They're in a group called longhorn beetles. It's as simple as that for tonight.
Makes perfect sense.
The pathologist in the group looked at that one. I bet it's some sort of longhorn beetle. Real original name, Wayne.
You know, the pathologists and entomologists aren't real creative with their names usually. It's pretty descriptive of the actual thing.
All right. Speaking of which, pathologist, you have a fair number on your first round here. Your first 2 pictures are peach, and this is from Douglas Sarpy County office. Planted this one last year, seems to be struggling. The leaves are turning yellow and there's some red spots as well. She's trying to get the Japanese beetles off, but she also thinks something else is wrong.
I believe looking at this could be a bacterial leaf spot, and we have seen quite a few of our bacterial diseases this year. With this one, you can't see a picture of the whole landscape. If they can do anything to improve air circulation and just make sure the tree's in good health, they may do some pruning depending on general pruning needs for the tree to open up the canopy a little bit. That could help as well.
All right. Your next 2 pictures are southwest Omaha, aspen trees that are developing leaf spots, and then on one, this whole branch is dying. So that first one was a whole big stem, and then we've got this going on.
Yeah, and so aspens grow fairly quickly, right? So in pathology, one of the things we talk about is grows fast, dies fast. And usually those plants are really susceptible to cankers. And when you see a large branch like that affected, I'd suspect if you'd follow that down, you'd see a swollen area or an affected area that would be obviously different from the adjacent bark. And you can just simply prune that out. That's going to help you the best with that. These edges and these yellows on this may even be part of the symptom of something that's happening down lower on that branch, because it is the newer growth that we're seeing some yellow edging on. So I would be managing that growth for cankers and try to prune out anything that's affected about 3 to 4 inches below the affected area.
All right, and dispose of properly.
Yeah, but not the leaves here,
Right.
but watch that stem for a canker or look if there's any swollen area on it.
All right, your next one is, this is Carney, and this is actually, he thought it was an ornamental plum. It's one of the choke cherries. So what is this?
Yeah, this is kind of like Wayne's longhorn beetle. This is black knot. Looks like a black knot. This is a fungal disease that hits all of our stone fruits, particularly plums and cherries. We see a lot of it. Prune this out about 3 to 4 inches below to manage it. No real treatment other than that.
All right, and your final one is also a chokecherry, a Schubert chokecherry, and this is in St. Paul, Nebraska. Sap coming out of the tree. Not sure what kind it was. We knew that, but he did put a soil drench down. Doesn't see any insects. What do we think here?
So a couple things here. If you look close at this, on the right side of that black area, there's also another crack. So I'm really wondering if somehow this tree maybe had some high wind speed, it impacted it, and you're looking at some damage. If there's a crack below that area where we're seeing sap, I would watch this for seeing how close it is to any houses and things. It could be a hazard tree. There's some sort of damage going on under that dark area where that sap's coming from, and then that crack. So just be careful and watch it. Not going to recommend to put anything on it.
Well, and that's a pretty big trunk
It looks
for
like
a Schubert chokecherry.
So that's
kind of a
maybe
big
on the
old guy.
older side of its life, maybe
Right.
too.
Right. All right. Thanks, Lauren. All right, Kelly, your first two pictures, unfortunately, come to you from Papillion, from the high winds. Your first one here is a maple. Two pictures on this one. The high wind broke the center out of it, and she's wondering whether it will ever regain a good shape, or should this one be replaced?
Yeah, that storm damage to trees is very disheartening when we lose as many as we do because they're so valuable. Unfortunately, when you lose the central leader or the main trunk, that's not good. And rarely will a tree, become a shade tree again and redevelop a central leader. So the other thing is when you lose the central leader too, or the trunk, that's an area where the tree won't coat it, which is that compartmentalization of decay in trees. And so the risk of decay in that is even that much higher. So yes, we would recommend removal of this tree and replace it silver maple, weak wooded. We've heard this before, brittle wooded. So when you replace these trees, with extreme weather, we'll probably continue to have extreme weather. So we want those weather ready trees. So look into a tree that's maybe not as fast growing and a little stronger wooded.
All right, thanks, Kelly. So your next one is also Omaha. This was a poplar. Leader snapped off again about 8 feet from the top, and a large branch, and he does know it's a former tree. He wants to know whether he can plant a new one in the same spot if he gets it ground down deep enough, and he doesn't want to move that raised bed if he can avoid it.
Yeah, you can replant in the same location. You probably do want to grind out that trunk somewhat. You don't want to loosen that soil too much because another issue with trees is they get planted too deep. So if they really grind it out and that soil gets really, really loose, after you replant a new tree, it might sink and become too deep. So that would be the only issue I would be concerned with. And then, of course, we don't always like those pretty things around those trunks, but I know people use them. Just make sure you don't plant too deep.
All right, thanks, Kelly. And your final two are Lincoln. He purchased this beautiful Japanese maple in late April. It was doing beautifully for several weeks, watered it, missed a week just as the heat turned up. But it looks like this. He's wondering, is this a goner, or is there any hope that this will come back next spring?
It looks like a goner to me. And when I zoomed in on this picture, it almost looked like it was planted in a container. So I'm not real sure if it's in a container or not, but chances are it was something to do with watering. Maybe it was overwatered initially when it was planted, or underwatered. If it was overwatered initially and didn't have a good, efficient root system, then that 1 week of maybe not watering and if it got really hot, was just too much for it. And Japanese maples are a little bit touchy.
Exactly.
But it looks like a goner. Sorry.
Yeah. Start over again, unfortunately. All right. Well, we've had a few features in the past on Japanese beetles, but they are back in force, so we thought we'd give you an update. Caitlin Chapman gives us some tips on helping to keep those darn beetles off our plants.
With over 300 different species of plants that they feed on, Japanese beetles are almost inevitable in our landscapes. These metallic green and brown beetles are invasive, and they skeletonize leaves and destroy fruits and flowers of many different plants. And to add insult to injury, they tend to show up in high numbers, making management difficult. Adult Japanese beetles emerge from the ground and begin actively feeding in June and July. During this time, females will lay eggs in the soil, which will hatch into white grubs, which feed on turf until they mature and overwinter. Throughout July and August, you can deal with Japanese beetles by hand-picking them off of easy-to-reach plants and throwing them into a bucket of soapy water. This is best to do in the evening around 7 p.m. and must be done daily to every other day to keep Japanese beetle populations low. Insecticidal options include topical sprays of active ingredients like bifenthrin or carbaryl, which will give your plants about 2 weeks of protection until a reapplication is needed. Organic options like neem or piola will give your plants about 1 week of protection until reapplication. Remember to never spray flowers to avoid harming pollinators. You can also spray only in the evenings or wait until the flowers are no longer blooming. To prepare for the beetles next year, there are systemic options such as imidacloprid that you can use in May. You can also treat your turf for white grub beetles, but remember, controlling this grub stage does not prevent adult beetles from flying in from other areas. We also strongly discourage the use of Japanese beetle traps because they're going to be attracting the beetles to your landscape, and they often attract more than the trap can actually handle. Japanese beetles cause our plants to look not so great, but they rarely ever kill the plant itself. And while there's no silver bullet for control, there are options that can help you protect your plants.
There's certainly not much you can do to prevent them from coming to your landscape, but if you do keep on top of them, they won't eat everything. Right now, they are really attacking those marigolds in our backyard farmer garden, and they're right down in the middle of them. You flick, and there they go. They're just dreadful. All right, Wayne, let's see, your next question here. This is from Unadilla, and these were on aronia leaves, golden eggs in quotes, and little red guys. He thinks we've seen this before, but he can't remember what it is. What is it?
These are freshly hatched wheel bug nymphs.
Fun.
So that front part of it's going to turn black here before too long. You can kind of see it already on the legs. These are good guys. These are predatory.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. All right. Your next one is also from Western Otil County. Hasn't seen one of these for a very long time, and it's relatively similar to your next picture, which is from Hawaiian Village along the Platte. But this next picture has some hitchhikers. So what are these green worms? And
well, I'm going to ask to go back to the first picture first.
Yeah.
So I can tell people how to identify. So there's two different big hornworm caterpillars that we can get on our solanaceous plants in the landscape. We have the tobacco hornworm and the tomato hornworm. When it comes to figuring out which caterpillar is which, you look at those white oblique stripes on the side. The tobacco hornworm has 7, which this one has. The tomato hornworm has 8.
And somebody counted, some graduate student.
Yes, somewhere back in time, someone did a lot of counting and figured that out. And so that's how you tell the difference. They feed relatively the same. Tobacco hornworm gets slightly bigger. So if we go on to the next one, there we go. This is fun because this is nature's control at work right now. Mm-hmm. Every single one of those little white things coming out of the caterpillar is a parasitic wasp cocoon. Mm-hmm. So that caterpillar is a toast, and they're going to produce a bunch of little wasps go off and take care of more caterpillars for you.
That's
so
awesome.
It's
perfect. Always fun when you see those. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. All right. And your next one here is, let's see, this is on the back of squash leaves. They were looking for squash bug eggs, but they didn't think this was squash bug eggs. What's this?
Well, there's a little bit of debate between Jody and I as what this is. When I look at this, I see the ring around the top, mm-hmm. and I think stink bug eggs. Mm-hmm. Because if you got in with a magnifying glass, you should be able to see what looks like a little crown running around the top. And it's tough from this to tell for sure. So if they got in real close and they saw that with like a magnifying lens, then I would say it's stink bug eggs. It could also be eggs from a moth.
From a moth.
Laid in a group. My gut tells me stink bug eggs, but...
And that would be because it's on squash or because of the little crown thing?
Because of the crown that I can kind of make out on top. And since they're dark, they're about ready to hatch.
Do stink bug eggs smell like stink bugs? Could they squash them in the day?
Oh, no. Well, I'm not sure the scent gland's active yet. I wouldn't know.
Okay.
That might be a good research project.
But
You want to volunteer as our sniffer?
but what they should do is scrape off and squish.
Probably a squish situation in this
Yeah,
case, because either way, that many caterpillars could do something to your squash plant.
All right.
Or
And
stink
if they
bugs.
smell like stink bugs, right, Wayne would know it, so he knows next time.
Oh dear. All right, thanks, Wayne. All right, Lauren, this is an Omaha viewer, has had daylilies in this location about 8 years. They do get water from an underground irrigation system. You've got this picture and I think a second one. This year and last, the foliage has turned brown very early, while everything else around is still green. Any ideas on this?
Couple of things on this. It could be there. Daylilies will get Fusarium Wilt, and where it's along a drive like that, and that's an area that could get pretty hot. That could be the case there. When I look at this, though, I tend to think it's just that response to extreme heat, and maybe it was dry. Maybe check that underground irrigation system, make sure they're getting plenty of water. If that's the case, I think it could be a Fusarium Wilt issue. You may see them gradually decline. It's going to be really hard to control that at this point because these are established plants and that fungus is probably throughout the crowns and little corms of that plant underground or tubers. So I would just probably watch the situation and see how it develops. Check your irrigation system. If you're getting plenty of moisture, you may decide to reestablish something different there.
So there really isn't.
It's going to be really hard to control that because it's going to be in all those little tubers underground. I mean, you can try some fungicide drenches, but again, I think it's going to be really hard to control the way those look if they're being impacted that much and they're getting adequate water.
All right, thanks, Lauren. That's probably not what she wants to hear on that nice strip.
Sorry.
All right, this is a viewer. Your next one is from Lincoln. Cucumber leaf edges are turning brown and they're drying out. They do get regular water. They're producing good fruit. At times, the whole plant looks wilty, and she's wondering, is this bacterial wilt, can she save the plant or will it transfer?
A couple of things. If we had bacterial wilt, you would see those vines collapse fairly quickly, and they wouldn't be recovering the way they are. With the white margin like that, I really wondered if this wasn't a response to just cool to high temperature and some rapid growth. It's too uniform to really be a disease. So I would simply keep providing water, see how this develops. If your new growth is coming out fine, I think they're going to be fine.
All right, excellent. And your final one here is Omaha. This is pepper plants. They're slowly losing all their leaves. They're getting black spots. She waters just on ground, not overhead. It's only happening to the plants in the ground. She's wondering if it's something from the mulch or what do we have going on here?
We're seeing we talked a little bit about bacterial leaf spots on another plant earlier, and we're seeing a lot of that. They're seeing a lot of bacterial leaf spot on peppers this year too. This can come in with your transplants. This is a reminder that anytime you purchase plants, if there's any discolored leaves, to remove those and use sanitation early on, or maybe you've had peppers in this site before and you had some residue where that organism is overwintering. So if you can, really avoid overhead irrigation. You can use some copper sprays to help if you pull those leaves off that are severely affected. And then at the end of the year, make sure you're cleaning everything up and getting rid of it because that's how that organism is going to overwinter.
And don't put it in your compost.
Don't put it in your compost. That would be ideal. Unless you're really good at composting and can get that turned and composted at a high enough temperature.
We're all laughing because I'm guessing none of us are.
Most people just throw it on a compost pile and there it is. So yeah, you're better off to throw it away if that's how you compost.
All right, thanks, Lauren. Okay, Kelly, your first one here is yews, and she says they're in trouble. It sure looks like a exact same spot on all of these right against the sidewalk or a dog with a leg.
Right. That's a possibility. Yeah, browning, it's not unusual for yews to show some browning. I mean, especially in the spring, it's winter injury, which that probably isn't in this case. Couple of things I'm noticing is, it's right there by the sidewalk, so I don't know what the exposure is. It could be just with the heat we've been having, that tender growth in June, it could just be some heat injury. Or do you use salt in the wintertime? Do you use salt, any kind of de-icing salt on that area? That could contribute to this. The other thought was ewes are very susceptible. They don't like to be wounded or bumped too much and they'll turn brown, and that was kind of right on a corner. So make sure something's not hitting that plant as, maybe somebody has a wagon and they turn the corner with the wagon and they don't quite make it, whatever. It could even be something as simple as that. So I would just snip out the brown. If you need to, just don't cut back beyond where there's green. And otherwise, they look pretty healthy, so I think they'll be fine.
All right, thanks. And your next two are leaf damage in hostas. Second year this has happened. They're in a mulched bed with a drip line in part sun, away from the wind. The front doesn't seem to have as much damage.
Okay, well, it's, when you look at it closely, it does look like leaf scorch, which hosta is very, very susceptible to. Especially usually more in full sun, but there might be just enough sun. Some of them prefer that full shade. So, and if you have low organic matter soils, they're more likely to get leaf scorch as well. And then again, we've just had unusually high temperatures in June. The only other possibility would maybe be a Fusarium crown rot or root rot. If the roots were affected and rotting, then the above ground symptoms would be leaf scorch as well. But she may just want to try to relocate these to a little bit more shade.
All right, and your final one is also a hosta. He has one that looks great and one that looks like this with kind of that funky center in it. What do you think here?
I couldn't see any reason why the one would be much smaller than the other one. I'm going to be silly and say survival of the fittest. The bigger one just took hold and developed its roots better, and it's now out competing with that second one. They're planted really close together, so you might want to move that second one and give both of them a little bit more space.
Well, and I think that's actually one hosta with a
okay.
hole in the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
And I've actually seen voles go right
go
through the middle of it. So
because he had asked why was one smaller than the other one.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's a possibility if there was some vole damage underneath there.
Dig and see. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Kelly. Well, we are proud to show you our garden, and this year has been another fantastic show. Tonight, Terry James tells us the containers are really looking beautiful. Let's take a minute to hear what's happening in the Backyard Farmer garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer garden, we're going to look at our containers and see how they're doing. Most of them are doing fantastically. We've got some great color combinations, textures, really looking really good. However, this heat and humidity is really going to take a toll on some of them. So if you want to keep your containers looking good throughout the summer, then now is the time to start adding that liquid fertilizer. Just give them a little bit of shot when you water every couple weeks, and that will really help bring those plants through this heat of the summer and keep them looking good until fall. A couple plants that we're going to make sure that we use again next year are our bunny tails grass and our new begonia Viking red on chocolate, an All-America Selection winner from 2019. So stop by the Backyard Farmer garden and check them out.
Right now it is time for the lightning round. All right, Kelly, you ready?
Okay. I'll give it my best shot.
This is a Bellevue viewer. They want to know whether mixing Epsom salts with water is good for your tomato plants.
It could be good if the plant needs magnesium, but they don't. So don't bother.
All right, this is a Cedar Bluffs viewer. He says his Brussels sprouts are doing beautifully, but he's wondering should he go ahead and start pulling off the lower leaves.
Sure. Sorry, I'm not sure why, but.
All right. This is a Walt Hill viewer. He has mature cottonwoods and white pines. He's wondering, can he go ahead and spray Roundup around the base to get rid of the weeds?
Yes, you can. If they're mature and you don't have any green on that trunk, you just follow label directions and it should be fine.
All right. We have lots of viewers who've seen us talk about drift on tomatoes, and they're wondering, is there any remedy for chemical drift on tomatoes?
Once the tomato has it, there's no remedy. The remedy is who's ever spraying to do it very carefully, not on windy days, not on extremely hot days.
All right. This is an Omaha viewer who wants to know, is there a place to get a free tree risk assessment done?
Not that I'm aware of. I would call the Nebraska Forest Service or a tree care service, but I checked with the Nebraska Forest Service, the Nebraska Nebraska Arboretum Association, and they have you can go on their website and you can locate a certified arborist on their website. That would be a place to start too.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, Lauren, ready?
Ready as a piece of warm cherry pies for ice cream tonight, Kim.
And now we're hungry. And I'm going to punish you for that. All right. Sioux City viewer had bought 20 bags of mulch last year and it got moldy. They're wondering if it will harm plants if he spreads it around his plants.
No, I would go ahead and use it. You'll want to make sure it's not growing into a mat inside there, because you can have some hydrophobic activity where the water would be repelled. But if you break it up and put it out, I'm guessing that's not the case anyway.
All right. This is a West Des Moines viewer who found patches of something that looked like either cotton or foam under the trees where the turf is thin. Some sort of a...
Or foam, maybe like depending on what it looks like. If it's looking foamy, it may be a slime mold. The other thing right now, our cottonwoods are all producing so much cotton that that's all over the place too.
All right. This is a Unadilla viewer. It has just the tips on cedars are dead. Is that winter, or is there a disease on junipers that's the tips?
If all the tips are dead, it's winter injury. If just a scattered group of tips are dead, there's several tip blights on junipers. I would just prune those out.
All right. Can't rotate tomatoes. What will prevent or slow blight?
Straw mulch, irrigating, soaker hose irrigation, making sure you have decent air movement. Don't plant them too tight. You can put them on a pole and trellis them, and that will increase air movement and reduce blight. And then good sanitation.
And I'm sensing a pattern here on the last question I asked. So Wayne, are you ready?
Sounds like I have to be the
4
long-winded on the last one.
And let that last question go along.
Yes. This is a viewer who works in her garden a lot, and she says she is just getting bitten to pieces by chiggers. How do you control them in the garden?
In the garden, probably the best thing to do is to wear a repellent. You can spray that on your pant legs or your socks as well as your shoes, and that works well.
All right.
DEET is the gold standard.
All right. We have a Lincoln viewer who found a big, pretty stag beetle in his garage. He wonders what they eat and why was it in the garage if it was not going to steal his car.
The larvae typically eat in rotting logs or other decaying organic matter, so it's not something that they need to be worried about damaging their home.
All right. We have a viewer who diagnosed juniper webworms. She sprayed the whole tree with diazinon. She wonders if one treatment was enough, or was that the right thing to do?
Well, you can't get diazinon anymore, so that may not have been the best choice to spray it with. Monitor the tree and see if you need to follow up with a different currently labeled product.
All right. This is a Grand Island viewer who wants to know what tiny caterpillar could possibly totally destroy her petunia blossoms.
Well, that's our old friend tobacco budworm.
Yeah.
It flies up from the south every year, from Lauren's neck of the woods where he grew up, and they feed on a whole host of things. Petunias are one of those fun things that they feed on, and they can actually turn the color of the petunias that they eat.
Yes,
so
they
kind
can.
of fun color changing piece. And I don't know how long Lauren expects me to drag this out.
You're done. You're
Any other
done.
flowers that
You're
they feed on, Wayne?
All right, Kelly. What are our plants of the week?
Yeah, I do have to say, though, with the Brussels sprouts, I've never grown Brussels sprouts. Are you supposed to remove those lower
Yeah.
leaves? Okay, good
Yeah.
for that viewer. I haven't grown them, so I wasn't sure. Yeah, the plant of the week, this is liatris. This tall spike is liatris or liatris, whichever you prefer to say. I think both are correct. Or gay feather is another common name. And this is one of our native plants, and it loves full sun, gets kind of an upright plant. If this is pycnostatia, something like that, it gets really fairly tall. They do fine in a rain garden, so the bottoms of rain gardens, they'll do okay. They grow from a corm, which voles tend to like, so that can be an issue with them sometimes, or they can come back from seed. So great pollinator plant as well. The smaller one with the very tiny flowers is Herrenhausen oregano. So it's actually an ornamental oregano. although the leaves smell like, and I'm sure are edible as well. But it's grown for these very delicate, fine textured flowers. It too likes full sun. It'll do better in a dry soil, so don't overwater it. Very pretty, delicate, fine textured bloom with attracts lots of pollinators.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Kelly. All right, your first three are from the same viewer, Wayne. This is near Mondayman, Iowa. Great big timbered area with large black walnuts, and we have the trunk, we have the leaves, we have several pictures of this. And they're losing the leaves in the canopy, and then they're finding these on the leaves. What do we have going on here?
This is Walnut Caterpillar. I happened to get called in on one of these just outside of Norfolk a number of years ago, where they had completely defoliated, no leaf tissue left on two 25-foot walnuts. Just absolutely gone. And then when they're done feeding and they're ready to pupate, they crawl down on the trunk like that and they spin all that silk, and then they pupate up underneath that. So all those holes that they're seeing up underneath that is where they would have exited as the moth. This can be an issue if it's repeated year after year for the tree. Typically, though, outbreaks of these don't go past 2 years because your natural enemies, your diseases and other insects that go after them tend to catch up with them.
All right, thank you. And your next one is, what is eating my coneflower? They noticed caterpillars and what appear to be eggs on the coneflower. What are they, and are they harmful and or invasive?
These are one of our native butterflies. This is one of our checker spots. It could either be a silvery checker spot or a Gorgon checker spot. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes from a picture which one you have, but they'll produce some nice colorful butterflies for you.
All right, so don't squish them. All right.
Depends on your attitude for the day.
All right, Lauren, are you ready? This is a Omaha viewer. She's raised Rutgers tomatoes in pots, and some of them are looking like this. They're in big pots that drain well. They're not root bound. She doesn't do chemicals or anything else. What is this? What's causing it?
This is blossom end rot, and this is a result. A lot of times it's a lack of water availability that's uniform. We talk about calcium deficiencies, and in a pot, you have, depending on the size of the pot, if you don't have enough volume, you may not have enough soil there with root ratio to get the nutrients needed for that fruit to develop. And then you end up with a calcium deficiency that does this. This is not a disease, so just make sure you're watering them consistently and make sure your pot is large enough for the plant.
All right. Your next two pictures are also tomato. This is Pisgah, Iowa, and this is Jetstar doing this. They're in a small greenhouse. He's had all sorts of plants that have done this year. 4 tomatoes. Only this one is doing strange stuff. He's got Boxcar Willie, Old German, and a sweet cluster. So it's just the Jetstar.
Just the one. So, okay, if it's just the one and you have several tomatoes, this is going to be a viral disease because tomatoes in general, all of them are fairly susceptible to when we see this type of distorted growth with our growth regulator herbicides. So if they're not all looking like this, I would rogue this one out.
All right, and your final two pictures are also tomatoes. Started with 1 and now 2 are dying. These are big boy tomatoes. They did add lime before planting and fertilizer.
I looked close at this, and you really don't see a lot of leaf spots, so I don't think that this is a leaf spot disease. If they're wilting, there are wilt diseases, and we can see Fusarium wilt, for example, in tomatoes, if this is a garden site that's been there for a long time. But in general, some of the lower leaves will yellow and fall off just because of the canopy. So I would just pay careful attention to this, make sure you're providing adequate moisture and consistent, again, trying to water from below if you can, and just kind of see how this develops, because I don't see a leaf disease that I would be concerned about.
All right, thank you, Lauren. And in keeping with the tomato world right now, Kelly, you get the next two, even if they kick back here. This is a Cordova, Nebraska viewer, and they're wondering, are they watering too much, or do these little cherry tomatoes have some kind of disease? Other tomatoes have sort of the same thing. She did mulch with grass clippings and is wondering if that could be part of the problem.
I'm not real sure what's going on here since it's a green tomato. I don't think it would be cracking from overwatering because we usually see that on red tomatoes when they're ripe and you're ready to pick and you heavy watering or heavy rain, you'll get growth cracks or cracking. Maybe I'm going to go with catfacing. Catfacing sometimes is you get distorted fruit. If the blossom sticks to it, a lot of times if it's cold temperatures, which we haven't had, but maybe just the extremes in weather, maybe for some reason, cause some catfacing.
All right, and your next one is a Bellevue viewer. This is Chef Jeff's Health Kick tomato, which is kind of aroma. Mm-hmm. Said the first one had the shape of a pepper, it was light in weight, it was hollow, and then it was bumpy and felt like plastic. What is this?
This is environmental as well. We call this puffiness in tomatoes, tomato puffiness. And it's extreme high temperatures, excessive nitrogen fertilization. If you get a really heavy rain, it's environmental mainly, and it can lead to this. It's usually on the earliest fruits, and the plant will kind of adjust, and the later fruits do not develop it.
All right, thanks, Kelly. You know, we've been astonished at how many people started gardening and growing their own food last year during the pandemic. One way to keep those plants growing all year long is in a greenhouse, and one of our faculty members here at UNL did just that. For our second feature tonight, Stacy Adams talks about how he grows all kinds of plants all year long in his own greenhouse.
So there's been a lot of interest recently in hobby greenhouses, mainly because people are becoming older generation, baby boomers retiring, and more recently because of the pandemic. So people are looking at ways maybe they can reconnect with nature, maybe do some of their own gardening at their homes. Hobby greenhouses are a great opportunity for them to explore that, extend the season, and have some personal enjoyment outside of their home. There are different ways that a person could go about doing a hobby greenhouse. You could do a really inexpensive model that would maybe extend the season into the fall and into the spring. But if you wanted to go on and grow plants throughout the entire year, then you would need to invest a bit more in having a greenhouse that would have good insulative qualities, high light transmission, and having some heating as well as cooling. There's different types of greenhouse coverings that you could have. The least expensive would be the type that would have like a polyethylene covering over a simple frame. But this particular greenhouse that I made here so that I could use it year-round is covered with both glass and acrylic. And it is insulated, so it's double glass, and it does have double acrylic. We do have heating in here. This greenhouse is fairly small. It's 12 feet by 18 feet, which is plenty sizable in order to do quite a bit of different things. But you also want to remember that you are going to be heating the greenhouse during the winter time, so we don't want to have excessive amount of size unless we're prepared to pay for that. So this particular greenhouse has a propane furnace, probably more efficient to run than an electric furnace because you'd have to have a large electrical circuit to provide for this particular house. We have a little bit of electricity in here, and I have a time clock that's set up because you have to remember, in particular in our region in Nebraska, our day lengths get very short during the winter time. So I have some LED lighting in there so we can start some plants and do some photoregulatory things, so I can get some poinsettias or chrysanthemums or regulate maybe even African marigolds on when they're going to bloom. So this particular greenhouse is a hobby. It's a bit of mental respite for me. So we're at the end of our season, so it's summertime. Right now I have some really neat tropical plants in there. I'll be transitioning here in August, so I'm going to put my hydroponics. I have a little hydroponic system, and I'll be growing lettuce and some tomatoes in there. The coolest thing ever is the fresh herbs. We just love having bruschetta. And so I have both tomatoes and I'll have basil in there, so that's pretty cool. Then I just kind of dink around in the coldest part of the winter because I have to keep the temperature really low. Otherwise, we're spending a lot of money on fuel. But around the first of the year, we'll start pansies and some of the really cool flowering crops that you'd like to have early season, and then do a lot of bedding plants and hanging baskets. I don't sell the plants that are out of here. I thought about selling them, but honestly, I just love giving the plants away. I've given them to some of my neighbors. I have a large family, and then my mom lives in a retirement complex, so I'm always taking stuff over for them. So it's just a great opportunity to meet up with other people and just have something to do for yourself.
As Stacy said, your greenhouse doesn't need to be fancy or cost a lot of money. You can build your own simply, enjoy those ornamentals or that produce year round. And that just looked, he has so much fun doing that. He's so good at that. All right, Wayne. This is a large, mature, relatively healthy pin oak, and she's isolated tip dieback. She thinks this is some sort of a scale infestation. And she does know, since she watches us, that if it is, she has to wait for the crawlers. So she wants to know, is it a scale? If so, what species? And thus, what to treat with and when.
Yeah, this is a Kermes scale.
There you go.
Oh. Wrong time of year right now. Gotta wait till those break open and the crawlers come scurrying out.
And that is when and what?
And it's gonna be tough on a mature pin oak tree
Yeah.
to time that if you don't call in a professional.
So give her a window, like August,
I didn't look up the
September?
window on this one.
Okay.
I'm
And
not sure
what
of the
should she,
window.
what do you kill this critter with?
Well, if you're hitting crawlers, you can hit it with a lot of different things, permethrins, some of the lighter pyrethroids that aren't gonna stick around and cause as many issues, because oaks have a lot of ecology going on with them. A lot of things use oaks.
All right, excellent. Your next one is a discovery of these resting on the underside of watermelon leaves. They all appear to have been recently molted. No apparent damage to the watermelons, and they appear to be feeding on the bindweed. What are they?
That makes sense, because they are an Argus tortoise beetle. And tortoise beetles in that genus love to eat plants from that family that include morning glories.
Wow,
So this is busy munching away on a weed for you.
that's perfect. All right, so it's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we have the dreaded, this is Lincoln, magnolia tree. White spots on the trunk, the size of a fingernail. They're sticky. What are they? And are they a symptom that death is imminent?
Oh, death is not imminent. Not in this case. This is Magnolia Scale. You actually have several windows of opportunity to manage this critter. Right now is not the time. You can wait till about late August-ish, and then you can use topical sprays for when the crawlers are out and up to second and star nymphs. They're manageable with something like a permethrin. And then when you move into the March timeframe, you can use a horticultural oil to smother them, or you can use a soil drench of like an imidacloprid type product in May. So you've got several windows on that one.
All right, that's
Which is a little
good.
different for a scale. Most of the time we've got like one window and that's it.
Exactly, and they're all over the ones on campus too. All right, Lauren, your first one here is Omaha. Lost a small branch off a tree, and they're wondering what is growing on it.
This is great. This is Auricularia. It's A-U-R-I-C, Auricularia. This is actually just a beautiful little fungus. It's actually the same fungus that's in hot and sour soup at the Chinese restaurants.
Really?
A little dark stuff in there. It's one of our
Nice.
little rubbery ones.
And just eating the dead stuff, right?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
breaking down. It's common on dead branches.
All
A lot of times
right.
on hardwoods.
Your next one is a Norfolk viewer. They wonder what this one is. It's almost like a cabbage.
Yeah, this is, and it's hard to see in this picture because it's far away. I believe it looks like there was a tree in this area and that this could actually be clusters of, which is unusual to see like this, but I believe it may be clusters of an oyster mushroom coming up around it. But it's really hard to tell. I just want to encourage our viewers, when you do send pictures of mushrooms, please send pictures of the underside as well as the top. And then the other thing that can help us if you do a spore print. Set it down and actually get some spores on paper.
Spores, okay. That's probably not going to happen very often.
Yeah, but I don't know. People can look up spore print. It's fun to do with kids. They're all different colors. There's some like bright colored ones. They're really pretty.
All right. Your third one is Lincoln, and they've been seeing their annual mushroom crop show up under the ash, and they think this is an ash bolete. They pick 30 to 50 of these every day or every few days. How do you control this?
Well, there's no way to control it. It's simply living with the tree. And actually, if it's a bolete, Kim, I believe our next picture looks is a different view of another kind that I believe may be a bolete also. In the previous picture, we're just looking at the upper surface of the cap. But again, if we can see the underside, then we would know it's a bolete if it has that porous material underside and not gills. With those, again, that's an organism that's living with that tree. If you want to get rid of it, you could cut the ash tree down and then wait till it all breaks down and then it may go away. Which you're probably going to lose your ash tree anyway, right?
All right. Thanks, Lauren. Okay,
Bearer of
Kelly.
great news tonight.
Kelly, this particular first one here, these flowers or these plants came up in a package of sun-loving flowers. What is this?
Okay, this is a spurge, and I'm pretty sure it's toothed spurge. So I don't know if it came in the packet of flowers or if they disturbed the soil to plant the seed, and the seed was there in the seed bank in the soil. So it is an annual.
All right.
In more of a weed. It's milky sap. It could irritate you. They might want to
Get rid of
not get rid of it.
All right. Your next one, she lives in western Antelope County, and she's been planting moonflower seeds, datura, not the vine, for several years. She didn't think it could overwinter. She's wondering, can it overwinter? Is this annual becoming a perennial?
Okay, well, this is datura. I mean, a lot of times the moonflower is a common name we use for different things. So the one moonflower is Ipomoea, which is in the morning glory family, and that one probably would not, definitely not overwinter, would not turn perennial, and rarely comes back from seed. This is a datura, which is also, the flowers are often called moonflower as well. And that one, there can be some perennial forms, and sometimes these can reseed as well.
All right, so she's lucky on that one. All right, and then your final one is a Council Bluffs viewer. This vine is growing everywhere. When they think they've killed it, it pops up 10 feet away a few days later. Took over the yard one year, and it's prickly.
Okay, so this is a hop. There's common hop, which is where they get the hops for beer, and that one is a herbaceous perennial. So the fact that it's popping up, maybe it's the common one. Excuse me. But there's also Japanese hop, which is considered an invasive species, and that one is an annual, but it'll come back from seed. So, and yeah, they can grow prolifically. The Japanese one can go 35 feet in 1 year. A common hop can go up to 25 feet in 1 year. So if they don't want it, the Japanese one is the annual. Mow it, pull it, hoe it before it seeds. And eventually you should get it under control, or you can spot treat it if you need to.